The Labour Party is reaching for power in July, but in the election campaign, party leader Keir Starmer has so far made headlines less with his content than with actions against the left wing of the party. If the polls are to be believed, the British Labour Party is likely to come to power again for the first time in 14 years in the general election on July 4th. The election campaign would therefore be an opportunity for Labour leader Keir Starmer to flesh out his still vague political programme. But Labour has so far, as I said, made headlines less with the content than with the old dispute over direction between the party's left wing and Starmer's moderate wing. The background to this is the determination of the candidates who are allowed to stand in the 650 British constituencies. Starmer has centralized the selection process, which is why a national party committee now examines all candidacies and in certain cases decides on them itself over the heads of the local sections. A striking number of exponents of Starmer's moderate wing are being considered in this fast-track process. Members of the left wing and allies of former party leader Jeremy Corbyn, on the other hand, are being more or less gently sidelined. As the Sunday Times reports, long-serving MPs are said to have been offered a seat in the House of Lords if they resign of their own accord. And last week, outgoing Labour MP Beth Winter even accused Starmer's party leadership of blocking and humiliating left-wing candidates with vindictive behaviour, as she put it. Faiza Shaheen sees herself as the victim of a purge. The prospective candidate for a seat in the House of Commons in North London was already in the middle of the election campaign when she was summoned before a party committee. There she was accused of having liked several problematic posts on social media since 2014. One post, for example, which served the anti-Semitic cliché of an Israel lobby in the USA. In a BBC interview, Shaheen tearfully admitted mistakes, but stressed that her exclusion was completely disproportionate. She accused the party leadership of having a problem with dark-skinned candidates and initiated legal action against Labour. The Southern English MP Lloyd Russell Moyle is also no longer allowed to stand for election, because anonymous accusations of personal misconduct from 8 years ago were suddenly made against him. By far the case of Diane Abbott has caused the most stir in recent days. The 70-year-old Londoner with Jamaican roots was the first black woman to enter the House of Commons in 1987, which is why she is still a role model for many Britons today. Under Corbyn's leadership, she rose to become Shadow Home Secretary within the party. But Starmer put her membership of the parliamentary group on hold a year ago, and the reason was Abbott had written in a guest article that Irish, Jews and travellers could be victims of prejudice but not of racism because they were white. The MP apologized and attended a course to raise awareness of anti-Semitism. But the disciplinary proceedings dragged on, and last week there were increasing signs that the party committee led by Starmer would prevent Abbott from running again in July. Abbott gathered her supporters in East London to protest against her impending ouster. In an open letter, 40 black public figures expressed their shock, and after even Labour Vice President Angela Rayner had thrown her support behind Abbott, Starmer gave in after days of manoeuvring and declared that the veteran Labour MP could run if she so wished. Because Abbott is not an isolated case, the impression grew on Thursday that Starmer wanted to ban all decidedly left-wingers from the future parliamentary group. The most prominent example is his predecessor Corbyn, who is therefore running as an independent. At the same time, loyalists of the party leader are being rewarded as Labour candidates in districts where their election can be considered certain. In doing so, the grassroots are excluded from voting, which is possible under the party statutes shortly before an election. On Wednesday, several politicians who are acceptable to the party leadership were awarded those comfortable constituencies. The most prominent among them is Georgia Gold, daughter of legendary Tony Blair advisor and head of Starmer's local district administration. In Brighton Camptown, on the other hand, the young Corbynista Lloyd Russell Moyle, as I said in the beginning, is not allowed to defend his mandate. And the reason is a complaint about his behavior, which the person concerned described as malicious. The young Muslim Faiza Shaheen, I mentioned earlier in the video, was also excluded from the candidacy because of her allegedly anti-Semitic tweets. And in 2019, she was only narrowly defeated by former Tory party leader Ian Duncan Smith in East London, and this time had the best chance of defeating the reactionary right-winger. Shaheen, as I said, is taking legal action now. And Starmer's actions against the Corbyn wing have power, political and communication-related reasons. With a view to his possible rise to the position of Prime Minister, the Labour leader wants to gather as homogeneous a parliamentary faction as possible around him. A strong left wing could repeatedly force a Labour government to make concessions. In addition, the Conservatives are portraying Starmer as Corbyn's henchman in the election campaign. That is why the Labour leader emphasizes at every opportunity that he has fundamentally reformed the party and broken with his predecessor. The fact that Corbyn is running against Labour as an independent candidate in North London is therefore not unwelcome to Starmer. But now the Abbott affair is damaging his authority as a fighter against the left wing of the party. The Conservatives are already asking how Starmer will take on Vladimir Putin as Prime Minister if he himself cannot handle Diane Abbott. Like the incumbent Tory Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Starmer has only been a member of the House of Commons since 2015. As head of the English Public Prosecutor's Office, he was previously expressly committed to party political neutrality for several years. More than one would expect from a 61-year-old Starmer, therefore, seems to trust the judgment of those who have been professionally involved in party politics for decades. And the key figure here is the campaign director and former office manager Morgan McSweeney. Critics have long accused the Irishman and his band of young men, as they put it, of being too focused on disempowering the party's left wing. This means that the necessary diversity of the parliamentary group, which means the consideration of women or members of ethnic minorities, is ignored. For Abbott, at least, as I said, a compromise solution emerged on Thursday. Nothing stands in the way of her candidacy, as party vice chair Angela Rayner assured, and the veteran may also be promised a seat in the House of Lords. That is a method that has been tried and tested for decades to make it easier for long-serving parliamentarians to retire from active politics. But we will see how this one will end. But Mark Logan is another MP who has also resigned from the Conservative Party. He wants to support a new beginning with Labour shortly before those new elections. And this means that just another MP from the Conservative governing party in Great Britain has defected to the opposition Labour Party, and that just 5 weeks before the parliamentary election. Mark Logan wrote on X that he wants to vote for Labour in the upcoming election on July 4th, and he's resigning from his party. I've come to the conclusion that we need a government, and I believe that the United Kingdom would be best served by a Labour government. That's what Logan wrote, who sat in the House of Commons for the English constituency of Bolton North East. The country needs enthusiasm and optimism, and he sees that in Labour leader Keir Starmer. And recently, former Conservative MPs Natalie Elficki and Dan Poulter switched to Labour. For Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, this is another setback in the election campaign. The Conservatives have been lagging behind the Labour Party in the polls for months, and recently numerous Brexit hardliners withdrew from the Conservative Party and thus from the current election campaign. In other respects, things have not been going well for the Tories recently either. Sunak had to call the election in the pouring rain outside the government headquarters at 10 Downing Street, as we all remember. And in the local elections in England and Wales, the Conservative governing party, performed worse than it has in 40 years. So we know how the outlook is. But if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.